Good morning and welcome to my garden. In this video, I'd like to show you the journey that I continue to be on as I discover how to do Syntropics in a backyard vegetable garden. I'm going to show you the plants that I've planted in my different chop and drop rows, and I'm going to mention some of the reasons why I've chosen these plants and why I haven't chosen others, and explain the reasons for my choices of where to grow them. Good morning and welcome to my garden. Recently I put a post on the Syntropic forum and someone said, "You're not doing Syntropics, you don't have any feeder or pulsar trees." So it seems what they were talking about was that even though I've got a lot of organic matter in the cover crop that I've planted, when I drop that, because I don't have any roots that'll continue to grow, I'm missing out on the trees that keep growing. When a tree is growing, it shares the nutrients and the sugars it collects into the ground. When you prune a plant, it prunes its roots, and that becomes organic matter available for the mycorrhizal network to share with all the other plants. I think I got that out clearly. Following the pattern that I had with my fruit trees down the centre of my garden, with my annual vegetables at the front and my chop and drop row at the back, I'm now creating a row of plants that can be chopped and dropped, and they will feed the plants that I want to harvest, like my nectarine and my apricot and my papayas, pineapples, and I believe they'll in some way help the vegetables at the front because of the mycorrhizal network sharing the nutrients. This morning I have started my row of feeder trees. These are elderberry plants. You can eat elderberries, but I won't be intending to let them grow to eating. So the purpose of these is purely chop and drop. I've planted it 1 metre from my fruit tree row for me to step over to harvest fruit. I don't believe a garden needs to be a mess, and I'd like to investigate whether Syntropics, the principles, can be used in a situation where it doesn't become a mess. I'm going to try and keep it tidy. I know what looks a mess and what doesn't look a mess is different to different people. So I have been to Landcare and I have collected a selection of plants. I don't want really huge ones. Now I know they often say eucalypts and acacias. Well, acacias attract so many ants, and I don't want ants in my veggie garden. It's unpleasant walking past a tree and then realising you've got ants climbing down your shirt. I also have understood that some eucalypt put out substance that deters other things from growing under them. And that's not what I want for my vegetable garden. So I've decided I will do it a little differently. I will get as many other plants as I can. So what I intend to do is plant these trees every 1 metre between the elderberry. Elderberry is a really big bushy bush. So I will choose to plant the taller plants that I got, and the others I'll plant around further on contour 1. Okay, I've planted some plants along the back of my Syntropic row. Some plants that will assist in the feeding of my chosen production trees. And that's an elderberry. Waterhousia floribunda. I believe this is a weeping lily pilly. Another elderberry. Hapulia pendula. Another elderberry. Sophra tementosa. Elderberry, Melaleucas salicina. So that's the start of my chop and drop row. I've chosen to keep them separate from my fruit trees, partly so it's easier for me to net a fruit tree, so that it's easier for me to harvest a fruit tree, and it's going to be clearer for me to know what I'm actually wanting to prune and what I'm not wanting to prune. This trellis was put here so I could grow some tomatoes. Be interesting trying to manage tomatoes growing there with the chop and drop row here, but I'll see how it goes. It's a learning experiment. That's what I like. So this is the other end of contour 1. Planted the rest of the plants that I bought from Landcare. Brania longifolia, Tustaniopsis, Laurinia, Senesifera. We have a tomato plant that's in the road, so I can't really plant much else there. Now this one's purple. Brania longifolia, Leptospermum petersonii. It's a lemon-scented tea tree. I realised that my chop and drop row had actually moved out this way. I had to push it over. Now see that underneath it's creating some lovely humus, and the worms have done a great job there, making all of that break down. Lots of worms in that. So that's what will be under all of this row. This row here, yeah, it's the same. It's breaking down beautifully. Quite excited to see the effectiveness of chop and drop. We all know mulch is good, but I've never done it this way before. I'm looking forward to seeing my chop and drop plants all grow. How they work as chop and drop. Before I planted them, I soaked them in worm tea with sea salt, and now I'm giving them all another drink of worm tea as a foliar feed to help get them started. So when I established this garden, the idea was that annual vegetables would be on the inside and I could come around the inside curve and pick them. Now that I come to planting for chop and drop, I'm putting all my chop and drop plants on this side now. This is east, and it's worked out well because we get an awful lot of wind from the east. And so these will effectively act as a windbreak, and it'll also protect from some of the hot eastern sun. But it occurred to me as I was planting the other day that actually over this side of the garden, that is north. So I was planting my chop and drop row along the northern side of the garden, planting a wall on the northern side of my contour, and that's going to create a problem because in winter that side of the garden will be in the shade all the time. Don't you love the learning that gardening inspires? Because we're in the southern hemisphere, anything planted on the northern side will get the best winter sun, whereas anything planted on the southern side will be shaded because the sun will be lower in the sky and coming more from the north. So my chop and drop row potentially is going to shade my vegetables. I've just planted out a full season of vegetables, so I'm not inclined to move it now, but I guess this is my next experiment in that I will be watching to see how much shade they get this winter, and I'll just have to see what happens. The same will be for these row, my avocado and citrus being in the middle of the bed, and with my chop and drop on the other side, I'm going to be shading the vegetables that I've planted on this side. I think next season I'm going to have to swap the bed over, which is going to work well because when I chop this cover crop down, I won't have to dig out any of the roots. I can leave them there to contribute to the organic matter in the soil, and if it comes back, it's actually not going to be a problem because it's part of my chop and drop row. And then that will leave the northern side open and clear for vegetables. What I've done is I dug up the chop and drop plants that I put over there and I've put them over this side. This is actually more southwest side of the garden, whereas that's the north. What we want is a northern winter sun. Once the vegetables are done along here, I will move all the bulky, not broken down chop and drop to that side of the fruit trees, and I will somehow make some more soil here to plant vegetables in this side. Now it has been my chop and drop row, so that's not nice soil, but I'm sure that if I lifted it there would be nice soil underneath. But I've just taken my gloves off and I know there are some spikies in that chop and drop. I've been getting plants from Australian Plants Online. Most of them are not native, but they're all fast growing and they're all good at being chopped. That one is a camellia. This one is a gordonia. An azalea. Frutonia. Another azalea. Viburnum. Another azalea. Tiburtina. Leptospermum lemon frost. I have planted pigeon pea between each of the other plants, so as they grow they'll all be contributing to the chop and drop. I've moved my chop and drop plantings over to the south side of the bed so that the vegetables can go on the north side. But between that we've still got some carrots growing. This morning I added Kings Park Special Callistemon. This morning I'm planting chop and drop plants on my third contour. So you can see I've got a tape spread out. The purpose of that tape is to provide measurements so that the chop and drop is evenly spaced. Now I know I tend to give plants a bit more space in the chop and drop row than typically Syntropics would recommend. I do this because I have the priority of keeping the garden neat and tidy. That would be an unnecessary decision with Syntropics. This is a list of plants I'm planting this morning. My criteria for choosing plants is that they have lots of leaf and that they're cheap. All of these were on a discount shelf. So some of these I got for $1, a price that is as cheap as I could buy plants anywhere. I've arranged them largely small leaf so that we will have a variety of chop and drop coming down the line, but so that one plant won't necessarily overshadow another, and plus so when I look at them I can tell which one is which. And we're all planted up. Camellia Tamsin, Rhodamachera, Leptospermum, Buddleia, Gordonia, Leptospermum, another camellia. And so they're all planted up. And there's my new chop and drop row, all ready to go. I did take out a few sunflowers just so I could actually get in there and swing the pick. I've also added some more chop and drop. Thank you, jacarandas. And I think it always looks nice with a fresh load of chop and drop down. My goal is to keep adding organic matter to the garden, keep building it up. I found a little rodent this morning. I don't think it's a mouse. I hope it's a native. I've put the word out to ask a couple of people what it is. They will live under these chop and drop rows, as will bandicoots, lizards, native frogs. Hopefully, I know the toads will live there, but we're just going to forget that and pretend they don't exist. It's becoming widely accepted that diversity is the key to a healthy garden. This is contour 3 on the north. And this side is my chop and drop row. So all the plants here are growing here specifically to be chopped and added to the drop row, and to add organic matter into the soil, to add diversity into the soil. Yesterday I planted some succulents in this garden bed. I don't know the names of any of them, but I do know they're very different. I have learnt that succulents are amongst the most effective plants for incorporating carbon back into the soil. And so they're clearly a very good thing to have in the soil. So I've added that to my Syntropics row. I've chopped the Syntropics row back to give me space, but I haven't felt the need to dig it all out. My chop and drop plants will eventually crowd it out and most of it will die off. But in the meantime, there'll be some vegetation in the ground, putting carbon into the soil, keeping the moisture in the soil, and feeding the mycorrhizal network underneath. I'm planting everything into a slurry of worm castings mixed with sea salt and sour milk and molasses. So that goes around the roots of the plant that I'm planting to feed the microbes and to keep the plant moist while it's establishing. We've got some buddleia, we've got some gardenia and Filtonia. I've also been planting some succulents here and here and here. And this is some Okinawa spinach. Thanks for joining me on this learning journey, discovering new things, realising where I've made mistakes and coming up with new strategies. Have a lovely day.